Hi, my name is James. I am the CEO and founder of Ven, a boutique RevOps consulting agency. We work with founders, leaders, CEOs, heads of revenue, uh, anyone in a tech company who's focused on driving efficiency and revenue. So we'll help with strategy, systems, anything of that nature. I would say right now my portfolio is about 80% in the US and then 20% in Canada. Now, there's lots of people I work with in Canada. My whole team is based in Canada, but our clientele is primarily US based, but we're growing here in Canada. Career wise, for me, I had worked for a good mixture of both Canadian and American based companies, but the Canadian companies I worked for typically operated in the US. So I think I'm really used to, and I started my career in sales. So I think I'm really used to an American audience, American stakeholders, working with American business people. But I see it a lot. There's a lot of us here who are operating, working with people in the US and kind of thriving off of the US market. If we go back, 5, 10 years, I think there was always a need for somebody to be taking a holistic look at everything that happens from when a potential customer enters your ecosystem, all the way through the managing of like the post sale and the whole relationship with the customer. That took place always, in some form or another. And then it sort of started to become formalized, 7, 8 years ago with function. First, we called it sales ops, then rev ops. And when we transitioned to rev ops, we kind of acknowledged that this is more of beginning at marketing, ending at customer success, before it used to just be focused on sales. We thought, I think, in my world, that when the market was good, because this line of work really erupted when the market was good, that this is when we were going to be thriving the most, because organizations who were doing really well were going to think, hey, we need an efficiency function here to make us go faster. Then the market turned a few years ago, and then it seemed like the demand for us doubled, because all of a sudden companies were like, oh no, we're in trouble. We need efficiency more than ever. And now today we have a unique set of challenges around the coming of AI and how quickly things are moving and how quickly tools and things are coming, that really demand somebody to take a holistic look at this, because what we effectively have are organizations that are fragmented, that have not a lot of longevity on their staff, with people without a lot of context operating out of systems where there's all kinds of cool new tools and interesting things kind of getting layered on top of each other and on top of each other. And all of a sudden these rev orgs have this problem where nobody actually knows what's going on in their systems. Nobody who's doing the job actually knows how to do it properly. And you have a big, expensive mess. And so these days it's really about trying to figure out how to help companies who are in that situation, which is effectively every company in tech. A lot of the time we get thought of as tool and tech stack people. Hey, you organize the CRM. Hey, you make this integration. However, the reason why an organization who needs us is usually because they haven't thought through the fundamental strategy. They haven't thought through the fundamental motions. What happens when a customer approaches us? What happens when we identify people we want to go after? What happens when someone's talking to us? That's something you need to figure out between your brand and the people who are operating it and your customer. Those things then get reflected in systems, right? And so often when someone approaches me and is like, hey, I have no visibility or I have no reporting, I get thought of as the reporting person. But we need to drill down through the reporting, through the systems, into the fundamental strategy and the actions that people are taking. So I would say, to answer your question, like, we are a critically important function at the very fundamentals of how your business operates. Everyone's always asking, what is the credible source? What is the credible person? What is the credible tool? And they trust who they trust. And so I've had the luxury of building a strong network over the last 10, 15 years in tech. And effectively, those people who I trust and I have a good relationship are out there operating as eyes and ears for me in a completely informal way, in a completely unexpected way. but all of my business comes through that. So I think the learning is how, if if I didn't have that, how do I establish credibility with a broad audience in a way other than through personal relationships? Um, I'm not sure how. I do some thought leadership stuff, but showing up at a place and meeting a person, I think is probably the first step toward doing that. There are two main things I like to think about when it comes to tech in Canada. One is I'm currently and always have been excited by and impressed by the level of talent that is here. There are really good individuals who are doing really interesting things. However, at the same time, and it sounds counterintuitive, there is a lot of work to do, I think, on developing tech in Canada. Because I see a lot of these people, and my business is no exception, as we just talked about, who are spending their effort and on things based not here and primarily based in the US, who are working for American companies. They're leaving and going those places, or they're staying here, and that's where they're putting all of their effort. While our tech sector is here and it's trying, but it could be so much better if the people who are here and the talent that was here felt like they should build here and build for Canada. Uh, and they don't. And quite frankly, I don't with my business, and I would like to do that. So Tech for Canada and any event of that nature will bring these people together who I know are already there, but hopefully we can start or continue to build up tech in Canada. And that's something I'm always excited for. I think building tech for companies that face the world is critically important. Um, and we've done that to some extent. You know, years ago when Research in Motion was in its prime, like that was a huge international success that was doing really well. Now we have sort of Shopify is under our belt. There's some smaller, more niche players who are killing it in their space, but there's just so much more that we could do. And I think that needs to be a focus. Like I think we need to focus on here and making our country better here in Canada, but I also think we need to be trying our best to be internationally relevant and internationally prominent with what we do with tech, because we sure have the talent. It's funny. I find this, and I've always found this with smaller places near bigger places. For my background, I grew up moving around a lot. Oftentimes, I was living in a place near a big city, and when I lived in those places, the locals thought of themselves, and they would never say it, but kind of as not as important as the big people next to them. And I think that happens on a local scale and on a larger scale. And here we are, a country of 40 million next to a country that is the global leader in almost every way imaginable, which is 10 times the size. And to your point, no other country around, right? And so I think in a lot of ways we have adopted that personality and internalized it, where we feel like we need to ask for permission, or we feel like we need someone bigger and more important than us to validate us. This has nothing to do with tech. I think this is like built into Canadians. And I really think we need to fight through that, because the size and the geographical positioning of our country should be totally irrelevant to how we feel about how potentially effective and impressive we can be on a global scale. Let's fight through that personality thing, show our talent. Don't be afraid of what's going on in other markets. Let's just do our thing, because we have done it. We just don't do it enough. For someone who does what I do, I have a very bizarre upbringing. Education wise, I have a bachelor's degree in English literature and a master's degree in film. And I know this isn't the same type of storytelling that we're talking about, but when you start talking about that, like I think about how even in the art that we produce in this country, we have it like, it's almost like it has to be heavily filtered through the mandates that the government establishes for us. Like the CBC is the authority on what are good books in this country that comes out every year. The CRTC is like gets to decide how much content we put on all of our television platforms and our streaming platforms. and that's like arm's length from the government. And this is just I go there because it's an example of how we, in terms of how we express our identity, are completely complacent and deferential to these like very large and traditional forms of authority, like the government, for example. Um, and so it doesn't surprise me that we are bad at storytelling around our businesses and around our talent and around the potential impact that we could have on the globe. Because again, if you look at every facet of Canadian culture, we feel like there are these rules that we have to follow that we have no control over. And so if we can break through that, I think that that's something that could be really powerful for, again, every facet of Canadian culture. And I'm sorry if we're going deep on like what it means to be Canadian, but I know we're supposed to be talking about tech, but this really kind of hits at things I'm passionate about. I think here in tech and what we could potentially do here is as big as anything that we have. If we can kind of break through these assumptions that we have about ourselves and these tendencies that we all live by that we may not be noticing. All sales, in a sense, is storytelling until a user or a customer is actually experiencing the product or service. The craziest stories, the most fun stories, and the most real stories from brands never get told. And anyone who's been in a company for a while or been around the block at a few different companies has stories. And these are the real stories about like how something actually happened and how a company became successful or flamed out, or how a person became who they became. And in a lot of ways, these aren't packageable, brandable, marketable stories en masse, just like this idea that Uber Eats was created because a bunch of Uber employees wanted pad thai and they weren't in the same office. That's not marketable. Maybe it is, but a lot of these stories aren't. So I think that coming together and like finding a place to tell these stories and share these stories um, is invaluable if you want to grow and learn from people who've done things that are kind of worth replicating and worth learning from. And that's just, there's no other way to do that than to actually just talk to the people.